For me, Heljan have really captured the look of the Class 86 perfectly. Hi there everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Jennifer Kirk, welcoming you up here to the loft on Weir Yard. Now today I'm going to be looking at the new model that's come through from Heljan of the original version of the Class 86. And I'd like to extend a big thank you to Heljan who have loaned me the model for today's review. It's a model which I've actually really been looking forward to. Ever since I got hold of one of the Bachmann Class 85s, I've actually really been getting more and more into the electric locomotives. Now, I already have a Class 76 from Heljan, and I really do like that model, but I didn't get any of the original versions of the 86s that they released, which showed them in their later guise with the flexi coil suspension. I actually missed out on those and did regret it. However, Heljan have re-released the model but in its earlier guise, and I'm really looking forward to taking a good close look at this. Don't forget that we've got some affiliate links in the description box down below if you too like the look of today's model and want to go and find your own version of it. We've also got a link as well for the decoder for today's DCC fitting guide, and this comes in association with DCC Concepts. So without further ado, come with me and let's take a close look. This is the model that we've got for review today, the Class 86 from Heljan. Now the 86 has been released from them before, but in its later rebuilt form, suitable for the much later BR and sectorization liveries following into the privatization liveries. This is the first time that they've released it suitable for the as-built condition, which still lasted right through for some members of the class to the early 1980s. The particular version that they've kindly sent over is catalogue number 8651, BR Blue AL6E3114 with the small yellow panels. So this is the livery that they would have been delivered in, but with the exception that they've had the small yellow panels added on the end. This model also features, according to the box, working lights. This is head code lights and tail lights, which are switchable on and off through the DCC interface. There doesn't appear to be any other lights, but we will investigate that once we get on into the review and take the body off this. It does feature sprung buffers that they're listed as one of the features, DCC ready with a 21-pin socket, and stay tuned towards the end of this video because in association with DCC Concepts we will be looking to do a full DCC fitting guide using the Zen V12 black decoder, and I have chosen for this job the DCD-ZN218.6, which is a dual 21-pin and 8-pin interface, so it's a really good all-round decoder. This particular livery is suitable for Era 5 into Era 6, so certainly for those of you who are looking to model the transition period where steam was still on the rails, but the electrics and diesels were starting to come through, this model is perfect for that period. It comes in Heljan's standard packaging with the outer card case that slips off, and then the model itself is here in the clamshell plastic pack. And then we've also got a brief history of the class. Now, these were built by BR as a follow-on from the classes 81 to 85, building on the experience that they'd gained from those. So this locomotive class was subsequently very long lasting because of that. It did have a few quirks at the outset, which BR did later on solve with the introduction of the flexi coil suspension, and that's the version that Heljan released last time round. This model has been retooled to accurately represent them as built. The main problem that BR actually had with these was that at high speed they had a lot of unsprung weight caused by the traction motors being directly mounted to the axles. An unsprung weight is very damaging to the track. Now, a number of different ways were trialled to try and get around this. The flexi-coil suspension was the one that was adopted universally across the class, but there was also the 86/3 subclass, which received modified wheel sets with a kind of rubber insert that gave some degree of cushioning as well. We've also got in here some information on how to get the body off, and I will come to that when we do the full DCC fitting guide. On the back, as is usual, we've got that full breakdown of all the parts that go into these models, and there really are quite a lot of separately fitted parts. The pantograph in particular does look to be quite an interesting assembly. One thing that Heljan really do go to great lengths to make sure that you don't miss this is about getting this out of the box. You've got to be very, very careful picking it up with both hands, and really that's down to a lot of very, very fine detail on the underframe, but we'll take a look now for ourselves. The only extra detailing that we've got here, it's not really detailing, but we've got a set of couplings to go on, but there is nothing else here for the user to apply to the model. It very much is ready to run out of the box with no user intervention or applicable parts needed. The clamshell packaging opens up and we get that first view of the model with this very, very intricate pantograph on the roof. It's all metal construction with springs in there, and it does look good enough to be able to pick up power genuinely from overhead catenary. However, I think once we get into the model we'll find that actually it is purely cosmetic. Now I'm going to very carefully lift this out of the box, and what Heljan are talking about in terms of the ease that you can damage this is that underframe detail, and you can see here that there is definitely a lot going on beneath the sole bar of this locomotive. If I turn this upside down, the detail just keeps on giving, and we've got a very, very impressive rendition of all of that underframe detail. That is probably one of the more detailed models that I've actually seen, and it really does look the part. In terms of durability, it's probably more resilient than Heljan give it credit for, but I suppose erring on the side of caution is always a good thing to do, and I wouldn't recommend putting its resilience to the test. We've also got the accurately modelled bogies on this, and this does look to be, to my inexperienced eyes, a really, really good rendition of the original suspension on this model. The steps there for the cabs do look a little bit on the chunky side. However, this is always the tightrope that manufacturers have to walk between scale thickness and resilience, and I can imagine that the cries would be that they were too fragile if they made them very, very slender. But it is something that has been flagged up on online fora, and well, I'll let you make your own opinion. I personally don't think it's too bad. I've certainly seen a lot worse on models, and I think within the price scope of this model, it's pretty acceptable. Just like we saw on the Class 25 that we reviewed earlier this year on the channel, the buffer beam detail all comes factory applied, and as you can see there, is pretty exquisite, but you are going to have to remove some of that if you wish to add the coupling. My personal compromise is always to add the coupling at one end of the model, so you still gain the advantage of having all of that really nicely applied detail there to enjoy as your model goes round the layout. Inside the cabs, we actually do have a really nice, well detailed cab, but when I had this on the test track earlier on, there didn't appear to be any sign of working cab lights, and this was a criticism that was kind of levelled against the Class 25, where actually Heljan went a bit far the other way and made the cab lights integral with the head code box. On this model, there doesn't appear to have been that kind of a compromise, but certainly I also don't see any real evidence of cab lights in there, and I don't think this model actually has them. Of course, when we get the body of this for the Dcc fitting, we will take a closer look. We've got some really nice flush fitting windows there into the interior of the locomotive, and what is really brought out nicely on the side here is that very fine rivet work as per the prototype. The louvres on the ventilation slats there really are nicely done, and it's also really nice to see that the handrails on this model really do look perfect. It was another area that the Class 25 gained a small amount of criticism, and really, to my eyes, there is nothing even for the hardiest of nitpickers to genuinely latch onto with these. I also like the detail on the door with the inset door handle. It looks fine enough to actually work, although that is a moulded detail. The printing on it is brought out just excellently, and it really does look nice. The rendition of this electric blue is really well done. It's got, for me, the right amount of almost a satin feel to it. I wouldn't like to see this in too glossier a livery. I think it would look slightly odd. I do remember from back in the day the Class 81, I believe it was, from Hornby 00, and the blue on that always looked a little bit too plasticky and bright, so it's really nice to see that Heljan have got a good rendition of this electric blue. As the box promised, the buffers are spring-loaded, and actually they've got a really nice resistance to them, and they do spring back out, as indeed they should. Same for both ends, really nicely done. And on the front face, for me, Heljan have really captured the look of the Class 86 perfectly. I also really like that head code box. We've got the head code number 1A76. On the other end, we've got 3A33. There isn't anything else in the box to be able to change that for anything else. But actually, fairly quickly on, these head code boxes became defunct, so they would probably have just been left stuck at a particular train reporting number, although certainly for the period that this livery is suitable for, it might have been nice to have had a selection of new train reporting numbers for those hardened modelers that wish to change them. Although it's probably not too difficult to print something out and put it in. I will take a look at the back of those panels and just see how easy a customization of that nature would be. We've also got these domed red tail lights, and they do look extremely fine. When I had this running on the test track, they do look really good when the locomotive is running. And we've got these separately applied metal handrails, and these are really quite superb. They're very robust, but the choice of materials and the fitting of these is absolutely perfect. We've also got these etched windscreen wiper blades picked out in the black, and they really do look good on those windscreens. There isn't really much of a fisheye effect around the edges of the windscreens, and the flush finish really is good. Looking inside, we've also got quite a bit of cab detail, although it doesn't appear as if any of it is picked out in any extra colours, and that is possibly something that a modeller could do as a spot of customization. With a very small brush and a selection of appropriate colours, you could really make something special of that cab interior. Looking to both ends, there's no crew fitted as standard, but when we look inside, we'll see just how easy it might be to add a crew to this model. On the roof, again, this is an area of the model that you're going to be looking at an awful lot when it's going around your layout. And it's nice to see that Heljan have pulled out all of the stops for this. The roof detail is absolutely exquisite. All the different panels are picked out and highly detailed, just as you might expect, but this is exceptionally well done. There are a lot of separately fitted wire detail, so not just are they fine, but they are actually quite robust as well. And that is sometimes a big concern for some of this extra detail, that it isn't resilient enough to withstand normal handling. Not so with this locomotive, and all of these wires and insulators are nicely fitted in place and show no signs of working loose. The pantograph itself comes latched in the down position. Now I don't want to strain this because I don't really want to break it, but there we go. It is actually quite easy to unhook, and then the springs push it up into the upright position. So if you have fitted catenary onto your layout, this locomotive will track that catenary really quite nicely. In terms of putting it back down so that it doesn't catch on things if you don't have catenary, it does actually pleasingly clip back into place rather quite firmly. And certainly I know my experience of the Bachmann 85 was that once the pantograph was up, it was the devil's own job to get it to sit back down again. No such issues with this model, which is certainly very, very important, because if, like me, you don't have working catenary on your layout, it's probably as well to leave the pantograph in the down position. And one of the things I may look to do is to have this locomotive double-headed with a diesel locomotive, so you could represent haulage away from the wires on something like a Sunday service. The white on the cab roofs is really nicely done. We've got crisp demarcation between the blue and the white, and that white really does go together nicely with the rest of the roof colouring there that we see in this prototypically correct buff detail, although a little bit of weathering to pick out some of that exquisite detail would certainly improve the look of this locomotive. Even if you wish to keep it in this nice clean ex-works condition, nonetheless, I'm sure that the roof would benefit from an ever so slight black wash just to pick out some of that detail, while still keeping the locomotive looking clean in service but used. On the underside, we've got the fairly typical Heljan centrally mounted motor drive, all-wheel pickup, all-wheel drive, with 2 lots of bogie towers that give drive down to the wheels. On the layout, its function was really quite smooth, and actually I found that the locomotive was very well balanced, and prototypically the speed and response on this was very, very good. The locomotive picked up a lot of momentum whilst it was running, and I felt that it really was a very well designed model. I had this locomotive running on the DCC Concepts rolling road, and actually even out of the box its running was very, very smooth with no hint of jerkiness. After running in for around half an hour, it was actually even smoother. So overall, with the running qualities of this locomotive, so far I've been really impressed. The actual lighting that's on this locomotive is really a case of all or nothing. I can turn the head code lights on and off, and they are slaved to the tail lights. Current draw is not too bad. This is our bench line with the locomotive not turned on, and as we apply power, you can see the actual current draw does not climb unnecessarily high. I now have the locomotive at 50% power, and it really hasn't added that much load onto the DCC booster, so I'm very, very pleased with that. I'm going to turn now to Dcc Fitting of this model, and what I will warn you from the outset is that this is probably one of the trickier models that I've had to be able to get into. It's not impossible, but I'm going to talk you through the steps now and just warn you that you do need to be quite prepared for this DCC fit. I'm just going to put down a little piece of kitchen tissue there. And the reason for this was a few people mentioned that they were worried I was going to scratch locomotives finishes. So in deference to you guys, I'm just going to put that down to protect this model, and also because it's on loan from Heljan, so I really don't want to damage it. I think it's probably a case of if you break it, you buy it. So what you're going to need for this is your very, very trusty jeweler's screwdriver set. And I'm also going to use an assortment of some of the cards that I've been sent over the years from people who've met me at shows and whatnot. And the reason for these is going to become clear. So if you see your YouTube logo on here, then thanks very much for the very, very handy cards for doing this next bit of the job. Now, we're going to very carefully get this locomotive upside down. And what we need to do, and the instructions that come with the model do show us, the clips on this are here, here, and then the corresponding positions here and here. And it is very, very tightly fitted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the larger of the flathead screwdrivers, and you need to be very careful. There is a recess in, force the body out. You've got to be quite careful, and it's probably as well, in fact it's definitely the case, you do not want to be grabbing the locomotive by any of this detail or you will break it. This is where the first of these cards comes in. What we're going to look to do is just slide this in, and we are looking to just stop that clip from re-engaging. So we've got the first of these cards in. Go to the other side of the locomotive, force it out, and I'm going to get another one of these cards. You can use old bank cards, driving license cards, anything like that. But this is quite tricky, and you've just got to be a little bit careful just to stop the screwdriver from slipping and running the risk of just scratching down the side of your locomotive. And as you can see, like I said before, it is a much more involved process, and you just got to be ever so careful and methodical. Now, we've got all four of those in. Now comes the tricky bit, because what we need to do is to encourage this locomotive to just drop out. So I'm just going to get my fingernails under the sides and just give it a shake here. It is very, very tightly in position. And again, for the other end, just try and shake it free. Got a little bit of movement there. Again, underneath. Tease this out. Okay, I think it's test card Jenny time. We're back, and it took a little bit of careful work. It's not really difficult, you just have to take great care, and it's important to make sure that when you're grabbing hold of parts of this model that you don't grab hold of some of that detail, especially on the underframe. But the top is now loose and coming off, and it is actually quite a tight fit, but once you've got it free of those clips, it does come off fairly readily. The actual plastic body itself, as you can see in there, there's no connection to the pantograph, and we've got no cab lights either. So it is something that you can fit yourself, and we did talk about this in the class 25 video. It's really easy to fit your own switchable DCC cab lighting, and this model might actually be worth considering for that as an evening's project. Inside here we can see, well, there's a lot of weight in this locomotive, and it's all low down weight in this lovely cast chassis. We've also got twin brass flywheels, which gives this locomotive its momentum when it's running, and the motor in here is actually substantially bigger than what I've seen on some of the earlier Heljan locomotives, so it does feel like this is a much more powerful and reliable model. The Dcc Decoder Socket is here on one end, where we see this actually quite small and simple circuit board. There are a couple of unused connections on this board, and it might be worth investigating what some of these do. I suspect one of these is the speaker connection for if you fit a sound decoder to this model. There is plenty of space in here for a decent sized speaker, so it shouldn't be a difficult ask to fit this model with DCC sound, although none of the versions from Heljan come with factory fitted sound options. We can see here it's fitted with a DCC Blanking Plate, and what I'm going to do is just gently lever this up, taking care, doing it from both sides a little bit at the time, and then that just lifts straight off. The decoder that I've chosen to use is from the DCC Concepts Zen Black range, and it's DCD-ZN218.6. Now this gives you a 6-function decoder, which is equally usable on both 21-pin and 8-pin sockets, so it's a very versatile all-round decoder. As you'll see when I get it out of the packet, it also comes with a set of fly leads that enable you to add a plug and play stay alive to this in a number of different capacities. The interior space on this model will actually give you room for even the biggest of the stay alive capacitors, although I have to say that with the weight and the reliability and running of this model, it's unlikely that you'd really need anything more than at most the smallest of these capacitors, just to tide it over maybe on dead frog points. I've chosen not to fit a stay alive to this model. It's quite easy to fit the decoder. Just look for the 21st pin out there on its own and make sure that you line that up to the corresponding header on the board. Don't force the decoder on. It will only go on one way, and when you've got it in the right position, you'll feel it drop down onto the headers. Then very carefully, just giving it a gentle but firm push, get it all the way down into position, and there you have your decoder fitted to the locomotive. Whilst I'm not using this lead, I always leave it remaining in place, because you never know when you might wish to revisit a stay alive to this model, and that does give you the flexibility. The extra fly lead that comes with the decoder does enable you to instead plug it to an 8-pin socket should you need to. I also make use of these for adding the extra lighting functions to models such as this, by using this as a means to break out some of those functions from the 21-pin decoder, because unused functions are highly unlikely to actually have a corresponding circuit track anywhere on this board, and this gives you a really easy way to access them. Once the decoder is in place and fitted, it's a simple task to test it first, and I would recommend testing it before you put the body all the way back on, because it is a bit of a task to get it back off if you need to do any adjustments. Whilst we're inside here, you can also see that the cab interiors are really well detailed. We've got drivers and second men seats that are the full height of the cab, so you don't need to do any amputation on your driver figures in there. One thing that might be a nice little project, especially when combined with adding functioning cab lights, is to pick out all those details on the control desk with a very fine brush. Getting the body back on is actually really simple. It's just simply a case of sliding it down carefully over the chassis, again being careful what you place pressure on. Just gently rock it and you'll feel those clips just clunk clip every trip. Getting it on is incredibly easy, but as you saw, it can be a little bit of a challenge to get it off. Running quality for this model was exceptionally good, and it's one of the things that Heljan actually have said is that the original versions of these models were such good runners, noted for their reliability and performance, that they didn't really want to tinker with the chassis all that much. So I can kind of understand why this model has not received working cab lights. It's understandable that if you have near enough perfection on performance, why would you want to jeopardize that by messing with things? It hauled a prototypically accurate train with the greatest of ease. The acceleration and deceleration was smooth, aided by those big brass flywheels, and that meant that really I could have loaded this up with double, if not triple, the amount of stock that I had behind it without any issues arising whatsoever. So we come now to the scores. First up is build quality. And again, there really isn't anything to fault on this. The instructions that come with the model, warning of damage if you take it out of the box wrongly, are actually erring very much on the side of caution. My experience of this model was that the detail was surprisingly robust. I wouldn't really want to put it to the test with ham-fistedness, but what I've seen here is actually far better put together than a lot of models which I've seen over the years. The detail on the roof and that pantograph especially are really nicely done and actually withstand quite a lot of handling without any signs of degradation. The pantograph itself is a work of art. I really like the way that you can have it in the up or down position, and it has that added bonus that the lockdown mechanism is very effective and easy to trigger so that it will stay in the down position and not try and take itself out on your bridges and tunnels if you don't have overhead catenary. Overall, build quality, I really couldn't fault anything, so I'm going to give this the full 10 out of 10. On running quality, again, it was exceptionally good. The only issue I had was at very, very low speed. There was a slight element of notchiness, but really that was something that I suspected that the more I ran it, the better it was going to get. And in truth, it's only a minor detraction, so I'm going to give this a 9.3. Dcc Fitting and Innovation was really the only area where I felt that this model could have been improved. All of the minus signs which I could level against it all came in this area. First up, getting the body off is quite involved, and with that very, very delicate underframe detail becoming a little bit of a liability rather than an asset when you're trying to tug the body off, it really was something that was not for the faint-hearted. That said, the instructions were exceptionally clear in this area. It's something that Heljan have had criticism levelled against them in the past, and actually they have listened to that, and that is really great to see. So the instructions with this model are very, very clear on what you have to do to get the body off. If you follow those instructions carefully, you won't have too much of a difficulty. Inside the model, the cabs have no working cab lighting. Now this might start to sound like a little bit of a scratched record, but it's something we've started to get from a lot of other models, and I know from talking with Heljan it is forthcoming on their class 45 models when they come through. But I can kind of understand that maybe they chose not to mess about with this chassis because it was so good and reliable. But it does feel in this day and age that more could be made of those DCC functions. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to knock off a couple of points for that. Overall, I'm giving this 6.5 for Dcc Fitting and Innovation. It's not the hardest model I've come across, but it is a little bit more involved. When it comes to accuracy and quality of finish, this model in this livery is exquisite. I'm really, really liking a lot of this little attention to detail. The printing on this model is really, really accurate. We've got nice and sharp edges where it matters. There is no bleed through anywhere at all. The lettering is crisp and clear, and even some of the detail that I struggle to see with my naked eye under closer inspection really is sublime. So I'm going to give this a 9.7. Finally, on value for money, really you do get a lot of high performance model for your money with this one. Retailing at around the £160 mark, we do have an affiliate link down below that takes you to Rails of Sheffield to pick up one of these. However, they are proving incredibly popular, and I do hope that that means that there will be further production runs of these, because certainly the tops numbered varieties do seem to disappear out of the shops as quickly as they arrive in them. So overall, I'm giving this a 9 out of 10. And that gives us an overall score of 44.5, which is very, very respectable when you consider most of the pull down on the score came from that DCC fitting and innovation. But everything else on this model is exceptional, and I'm really, really grateful to Heljan for lending me this model for doing this review. Can I recommend it? Wholeheartedly so, and I'm already on the lookout to make sure that I can pick up a Tops Blue example for Weir Yard. Even though I don't have catenary, there are plenty of excuses to have one of these in my fleet, not least a Sunday drag away from the wires for engineering work. Double-headed with a diesel, there's always an excuse to run an electric locomotive on any layout. Well, I hope you found that video really informative. Don't forget as well, we've got some affiliate links in the description down below to take you to Rails of Sheffield for both the Heljan Class 86 models and also the Zen Black decoder from DCC Concepts that we used for the Dcc Fitting. Tickle that like button and share the video too. Sharing is of course caring on social media, and if you haven't already done so, do consider subscribing to the channel and ringing the bell for all notifications. So until next time, you take exceptionally great care of yourself, and I really look forward to seeing you again. Until next time, take care and happy modelling. Bye for now. I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Offshore Allen, oorail.co.uk, Michael Lockie, Helen Sink, Peter Bolton, Brian and Dorothy Mudd, Gary Lewis, David Quinn, Sparky107107, George Botterini, Chris Moss, Robert Steers, MD of San Juan Model Company and Grantline Products, Sam Yates, Dale Williams, John N from NC, NYMRish, Jonathan Foster, Peter, Graham Foster, Clifford Ison, Larry W. Grant, and NI Railways 4000 class. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.